evening. The flags are at half-staff. The President has postponed his State of the Union address to Congress. The nation tonight is grieving for 7 American astronauts. There was no hint of trouble early this morning at the beginning of the Challenger mission, but then a devastating explosion killed the 5 men and 2 women on board, including Christa McAuliffe, the school teacher from Concord, New Hampshire. NASA officials say they do not know what went wrong. I'll be back in just a moment. The picture is now etched in our minds, but still horrifying. The disastrous end of the 25th Shuttle mission. The sudden death of 7 astronauts, 5 men and 2 women, including the first teacher in space. Americans once again reaching for the stars, and this time, the first time, not making it. That is why the nation's flags are at half-staff tonight.
This is an ABC News special. The Shuttle, Disaster in Space. Reporting from Washington, here is Peter Jennings.
What we're going to try to do in the next hour is to put this national tragedy in some sort of context. The nation has lost 7 explorers. Ever since the manned space program began a quarter of a century ago with people like Alan Shepard and John Glenn, the astronauts, in one way or another, have seemed to belong to the nation. We do not know exactly what happened up there 10 miles above Cape Canaveral this morning, but we will talk to other astronauts about what might have gone wrong. We certainly know what happened here on Earth. The shock and the sorrow has been truly international in scope. And so we'll talk, besides to just plain folks, to politicians, including Senator Jake Garn, who's been on the shuttle, and to James Michener, who so effectively captured the space program in his book. But we're going to begin with those who, to say it again, we have all lost. Here's ABC's Stone Phillips.
They were America's crew, men and women, veterans and first-timers, parents and even a classical pianist. They came from Akron and Detroit, Boston and the Carolinas. They were pilots and engineers and a teacher, and they were young. The oldest would have turned 47 in May. What they shared was a pioneer spirit, a passion for adventure, and a belief that man's discoveries in space can help solve problems on Earth. Their leader was Commander Dick Scobee, age 46, making his 2nd journey into space. He became an astronaut in 1979 after 22 years in the Air Force. He saw combat duty in Vietnam, won the Flying Cross and Distinguished Air Medal, and later, as a test pilot, logged more than 5,300 hours in dozens of experimental aircraft. Born and raised in Washington State, Scobee is survived by his wife June and 2 children. A few months ago, he returned to his high school to share his enthusiasm for space.
He really wanted to interact with the kids. It was okay to talk to the adults, but his whole purpose of coming back was to deal with the kids and maybe give them some sort of a message or a goal.
Second in command was pilot Michael Smith, a 40-year-old commander in the U.S. Navy on his first shuttle mission. Like Scobee, he had served as a pilot in Vietnam, been decorated, and gone on to train as a test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 1980. He was married and the father of 3, and close to Senator and former astronaut Jake Garn.
Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about it because these were my friends. Mike Smith, the pilot, was my mother hen the first month that I trained. They assigned him to me, go to my classes and help brief me. And I don't know of any time that I have been more shocked or more moved than when my first wife was killed in an automobile accident.
39-year-old Ellison Onizuka was Hawaii's first astronaut. His hometown honored him with a traditional parade before he left for astronaut training. Onizuka was also a husband and father, seen here with his 2 girls. Before turning astronaut, he taught at the elite Air Force Test Pilot School in California, and as chief of engineering there, was responsible for all instrumental and flight testing modifications on highly experimental jet aircraft. For Onizuka, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, the exploration of space was a way to serve man's more immediate needs.
There are a lot of outcomes from these projects which will affect both our society and the rest of the world.
36-year-old Judy Resnik from Akron was on her 2nd mission. Her specialty, electrical engineering, her assignment to operate the shuttle's mechanical arm. On her first mission, she used the device successfully to help remove ice from the outside of the orbiter. It was also on that mission in 1984 when the shuttle Discovery aborted takeoff moments after the engines had been fired. Resnik later expressed confidence in the shuttle's safety systems.
After it all happened, we were all very grateful that the safety features do what they're supposed to do on the orbiter. And I think that the system has been designed such that anything that could present a problem will be taken care of by these safety features.
When Resnik wasn't flying, she sometimes doubled as a commentator, helping bring to life for television viewers what it was like to take off on board the shuttle. Gregory Jarvis, age 41, was a Hughes aircraft engineer on board Challenger to conduct tests on the effect of weightlessness on liquids carried in tanks. NASA hoped his experiments would provide information for the design of liquid fuel rockets. He was born in Detroit and trained as an Air Force satellite engineer. He was married but had no children. Mission specialist Ronald McNair was doing research on lasers when he was selected to become an astronaut in 1978. Born in Lake City, South Carolina, schooled at MIT, he brought a background in physics to the shuttle program. This was his second flight. A husband and father, McNair saw space travel as a calling for himself and mankind.
So I see it as something that we must do, and I see it as something that's part of man's nature to explore.
And finally, the first teacher in space, Christa McAuliffe, chosen from more than 11,000 applicants for what she described as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Well, it was a challenge, and it was something that I always ask my students, you know, to go and seek whatever they feel they can do and reach a little higher.
McAuliffe taught social studies in Concord, New Hampshire, and she said she wanted to bring the wonder of space to students all across the country. She'd planned to give lessons on weightlessness and life in outer space that were to be televised to millions of schoolrooms. She's survived by her husband, her 2 children, and all the students she taught and adored in Concord.
She did this to get people into the space program, you know, to open up people's eyes and get people more enthusiastic about it. And I know that she will hope that people take this as a bad accident, as bad accidents do occur, and just do have faith.
In the end, faith is what America's space program began and grew up with, that and technology. Today, whatever it was that went wrong, it wasn't a problem of faith. Stone Phillips, ABC News.
The 7 men and women who flew on Challenger this morning, in some cases having flown before, and reminding us, of course, that the success of the space program has been such over the last few years. This was the 10th mission of Challenger and the 25th of the shuttle program, that we have come to take its success and its safety very much for granted until today. I suppose the reminder there is that we now identify with those men and women in a much more personal way than we have done almost at any point since the beginning of the space shuttle program, with the exception of a woman flying for the first time, or in the case of the first black astronaut in space. You saw in Stone Phillips' report Senator Jake Garn from Utah, who said that today's accident was so devastating to him it was clear. Senator Garn is now at Andrews Air Force Base, having just got off the Vice President's aircraft, having flown to Cape Canaveral to talk to the people at Launch Control and clearly to talk to the families. Senator Garn, I think I know what the mood and the atmosphere was that you found down there, but would you tell us anyway?
Well, obviously it was very difficult. You always feel so inadequate. What do you say to people when they have lost their loved ones, and particularly where I was so personally involved and knew those that were killed today. But I was so impressed with Mrs. Scobee. She stood up and she said, "We want you to know, Mr. Vice President and Senators, and I'm sure I speak for all of the families, that we want the space program to go on. We don't want this tragic accident to slow it down or stop it." And she said, "We know that our loved ones would feel the same way." And so it was just a very moving and touching experience.
Senator, you flew on the shuttle last April. You're an enormous supporter and very much a booster of the space program. What do you think today will do to America's program in space?
Well, obviously, we can't fly again until we determine the cause of this tragic accident. But once that has been determined, we make certain that it can't happen again, then the space program should continue. We have learned so much from space. It benefits all of God's children, every place on this earth. The basic research and development that goes on is so valuable to us, and that must continue. And I think we need to look at the fact that we flew 56 manned space missions, a remarkable safety record. before this tragic accident today. So I hope that my colleagues will be smart enough to recognize the values of space flight, listen to Mrs. Scobee, and have the space program continue.
Senator, we have been thinking today about why this has been such a shock to the nation. Why do you think?
Probably because the space program has been so successful. John Glenn was with me today, and from his very first orbital flight, we have not lost a single American in space. And that is a remarkable record, and I suppose too many people have taken it for granted. They haven't realized that we are still in the infancy of space flight, that we still have a great deal further to go, just as in the beginning of general aviation after the Wright brothers. And so I guess they just expected never to have an accident. We just continue going on with our magnificent success record.
And Senator, there has been today the inevitable mini debate, I think we can say, about the value of man in space versus the value of sheer technology in space. Why should man go into space so constantly?
Why should man have explored the West? Why should the man have crossed oceans? There is a balance that we need in space. We have the Uranus mission out. We've done a lot of unmanned space programs. But you look at what man has been able to accomplish. You look at the work that has been done in space. You look at the experimentation on medicines for the future. You look at the repair, the retrieval of satellites in space. Man can do a great deal that machines can't do, and so you need a balance of the two. And we have had that, and that balance should continue, using robotics and using man.
Senator, I know this has been an extremely difficult day for you. I do have one last question. We were immensely frustrated waiting for NASA's briefing today and getting as little as we did. Do you think NASA will reach some kind of conclusion fairly quickly based on the data they have?
I would not expect a quick conclusion to this. There is so much information. There are hundreds of channels of telemetering data that comes back that has to be analyzed. They'll have to appoint a commission to study this. And I don't think they want any quick fixes. They want to know what happened and why and how to fix it. And that is the important thing, not speed in making that determination, to make sure we make a sound determination and sound recommendations.
Senator, you're very thoughtful to take the time for us when you've given so much time to the families today, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Jake Garn, senator from Utah, who flew on the shuttle last April, and who, as we said, and as you can clearly see, is an enormous booster of the continuation of the American manned space program. The senator raises the question of safety and delay. Back in 1967, when the astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee died when their spacecraft caught fire on the ground, it took 22 months before the space program was resumed, which will give you some indication of how long we might now have to wait before the manned space program, the shuttle program, continues.